either Mike Vrabel was the best man in his wedding or he was the best man at Mike Vrabel's wedding. Either way, like besties, that Luke Fickell said that he wanted to have Mike Vrabel around in whatever capacity, not going to be a defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, but have him around spring practice and just wants him around the team. So Mike Vrabel making his Big Ten return, not where we nor Joe Rexrode expected him to be.
No.
It'll be interesting. At least something to keep him occupied. I listened to Charles Robinson on Robbie and Rexrode this morning. He said, Mike wants to coach. And I believe it.
Yeah.
You don't lose that itch ever.
But the opportunity just didn't, for whatever reason. And we've heard the reasons, or at least allegedly what some of the reasons were. But, when you're a coach, especially a young coach, you want to get back into coaching. Once you lose one job, you want to get back into another, or you want to be around it. So it'll be interesting to see, how it goes in Wisconsin for him. And I know it won't be in a capacity of a coach with the name, but just being around the guys and telling them or explaining to them what to expect and whatnot. I'm surprised that, he still hasn't gotten a DC job or something. I know there has been, speculations. I think who's DC? Dallas, or I think it was another team I was reading that, he may be in the running for one of those jobs. But, once a coach, especially when you're as young as Mike Vrabel and has had the success that he has had, you want to get back right into coaching. You want to get back into, teaching and, because the longer you're out of it, then you tend to be forgotten about, but you want to stay in it. And it seems like, even if he does go, up to Wisconsin and just to help and just to observe, I think that's better than not doing anything at all.
And I think sometimes it can be a good thing. Like Cliff Kingsbury, for example, he just kind of disappeared for a couple of years. He spent a year as the quarterback's coach at USC, and now you look at the Raiders wanted to hire him, and then he said, wait, no, just kidding, never mind, I'm going to Washington. I think that was kind of the best thing for Cliff Kingsbury, was just to disappear for a little bit, because the public perception of Cliff Kingsbury was not very good whenever he was fired in Arizona. I think it's kind of the opposite for Mike Vrabel, that his public stock, at least in my perception, is incredibly high. So I don't think it's going to be too long before Mike Vrabel finds another head coaching job. But a little bit of breaking news coming out from Ian Rappaport. Former Raiders interim offensive coordinator Bo Hardegree is expected to be hired as the new Titans quarterbacks coach under Brian Callahan. He was Las Vegas' interim OC in Week 9. The Raiders averaged 23 points a game, ranking inside the top half of the league. An impressive improvement, yada, yada, yada. So Bo Hardegree, former Tennessee Volunteer, played quarterback with the Vols in the early 2000s.
Oh, Vol fans, here they come.
This is a great hire! He's kind of bounced around as quarterbacks coach. He was in Miami for a stint, was with the Jets for a stint, was with the Patriots for a stint, and most recently with the Raiders. I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about Bo Hardegree.
Know nothing, about Coach. Obviously, as we continue to go, we will learn more about it. And I know us three will expedite it a little, reading some things in between breaks, trying to find out who he is as a coach. And then why did they choose him instead of some of the other candidates that
early in his career with the Broncos. I don't have Brian.
2014, so that's around the same
Is
time.
that Callahan's?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they
That's what I
must
was
have,
wondering. So-
cross paths with one another.
Offensive quality coordinator coach.
Okay. So, I mean.
Yeah, so they did cross paths in Denver. So that's where that relationship comes from. As it comes to offensive coaches, I'm going to trust Brian Callahan.
Yeah.
That's his baby. He brings in his staff. But quarterbacks coach, that's an incredibly important role. Will Levis is going to spend more time with the quarterbacks coach than probably any other member of the staff.
Oh, he will. He spends the most time with the quarterbacks coach. And then, at least from this standpoint, the offensive coordinator as well, because, he won't have duties during the game of calling plays, but he will be tasked to help put together everything during the week. So quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator will be tied closely to Will Levis and his performance, I believe.
All right, so we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive there of the Titans' new quarterbacks coach, but we heard from Rand Carthon on the Titans official podcast. So we heard Chad Brinker earlier this week giving kind of a peek behind the curtain of what his elevated role looks like, of what his involvement is with the team and the scouting process, how analytics are going to be applied to the Tennessee Titans. We also heard from Rand Carthon a couple of days ago. We weren't able to get into it yesterday, but I did want to get into it today. Just first of all, before we get into specific clips that stood out to us, just overall takeaways from what we heard from Titans general manager Rand Carthon on the official Titans podcast.
Well, I thought that it was a little different type of conversation, I think, than it was with Chad Brinker, because I know a little bit more about Rand Carthon going into the discussion. I really didn't know anything about Chad Brinker. I shouldn't say anything. I've read about it, but I've never really heard him talk in detail. I've heard Rand speak many times, even though once again in there you did hear him in the interview say, maybe I should get out there a little bit more. He goes, I'm not saying I've done everything right. He said it's something he's thought about, because he said it a couple of times now, that maybe he does need to get out there, because I think one of his strengths is he is a people person, right? He's a good communicator, and one of the things that they accentuated in this interview is his relationships and his ability to connect with a lot of people over time have come in handy for him here. And he said, we struck early, and he, it was really Mike Keith setting him up to talk about this. But, for example, the Denard Wilson hire, I always want to say Denard Walker, your former teammate, the cornerback, right, for the Titans. Denard Wilson, I have to think to make that distinction in my mind before I say it. But he goes way back with Denard Wilson. Denard Wilson was being courted and probably would have gotten a job with some team, and they felt like by striking early, A, and by B, him going so far back with him helped land him and keep him away from other teams. We'll see if he ends up being the right guy, but I thought that was interesting. Like, it really seems to me like he has streamlined his focus of what his job is going to be as the GM.
He gets to define that now.
He gets to define it. And he says, I'm a relationship guy. I'm a guy that wants to be talking to the coaches, pulling everybody together, making sure everybody is on the same page. And I think some of the other administrative stuff falls on Brinker, like as they've reshaped all this stuff. So I'm trying to get a sense in my mind how this is going to work after listening to both of those podcasts. I thought that was the most valuable thing that comes out of being able to hear both of those guys talk about what's ahead.
Yeah, because they're all on the same page in regards to what they envision this franchise looking like. When listening to Rand Carthon, nothing about that article changed my thought on who I believe he is as a person and what I think he can be, or who I think he can be as a GM. He's a people's person. He's humble but confident in what he does. He doesn't mind giving the credit to other people. He doesn't mind, telling you, hey, this is why I'm in the position. I have no problem with saying it was because of this guy or this guy. And when you see that constantly, or you hear that constantly from someone, it makes you believe that, okay, this is who they are as a person, and this is how they want to run said business. And to me, this is how Rand wants things to be ran. Transparency, honesty. There's a clear communication between everybody. Yeah. We're all in this together. Because there was one question, and I don't know who asked it, maybe Coach Mack or Mike. It may have been Mike Keith that asked it about the players and how do you evaluate players in it. And he's like, no. And he's like, no, it's not me. It's the coach. I'm just getting players for the coach. It's not me going out and saying this is the players we need. No, I'm talking to the coach. So by talking to the coach, I know what player I need to go get. It's not me getting the players and then telling the coach, hey, you got to work with them. No, it's It's me talking extensively with the coaching staff and then us going out and getting those players that the coaches want. So to me, that shows a willingness to work with someone and a willingness to not care who gets the credit. Obviously, if this team does well, the GM's going to get the credit. The head coach is going to get the credit. Those are two of the guys that are going to get the credit, majority of the credit. And then obviously the quarterback, it follows, sort of in that suit. But if you ask him, he doesn't care. It's like, listen, I just want to build a team that can go out there and win football games. I don't care who gets the credit, because ultimately, if we do well on the field, all of us are going to do well. And all of us are going to get, he didn't say it, but you think if everybody does well, then everybody eventually gets promoted to some other area, whether it be on that team or somebody else's team.
Everybody gets the credit.
Exactly.
I think that you look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Look at the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay tree. Everybody wants a piece of that because that's what's winning. That's what's working. And there have been so many assistants in the Shanahan-McVay tree that have gotten jobs. Hello, Brian Callahan being one of them, just simply because of their association. Everybody gets the credit whenever things are going well. It's when you're losing. That's what's tough. Yes. And one thing that really stood out to me in that podcast with Rand Carthon is there's a lot of newness, and there should be. It's a new head coach. It's a new power structure. And Rand Carthon talked about how they're going to be doing things differently, how there's going to be a reset. And I don't think that necessarily only means a reset with the roster, a reset with the on-the-field play, but it's a big reset with what's going on within the front office, of a reset of how they approach scouting, a reset of how they evaluate players. And this is Rand's show. It should be different. It should be new because you've got a new person that's ultimately calling the shots. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way of doing things. We'll see. Yeah. I mean, time will tell what's the right way of doing things, what's the right system, but it's at least new. And now it's Rand Carthon being able to run with it. And I've said from the beginning, I like that structure. Whether it's Rand, whether it's Amy, whether it's Brian Callahan, whoever's calling the final shots, I like that somebody does have that final say. And there was one thing that Rand Carthon, a question that Rand Carthon was asked, that I'm a little bit skeptical of. But I want to dig that down here. This was Rand Carthon when he was asked about the systemic approach of how they're approaching this offseason.
All the stuff that you've been doing since you've been hired, and as you said, it's been exhilarating, but it's also been exhausting. But just from the outside looking in, it looks like you've got a systematic approach that's working pretty well. Is that a pretty good concept that I'm seeing?
Of course. And I mean, Mac, you've known me longer than everybody here, and you've been a part of showing me the way and how to do things, and so this has always been the way I've gone about my business. I know there are some that want to hear from me more, and I probably should do that. I'm not saying that the way I did everything was right, but at the same time I have a job to do, and that's what I'm going to ultimately be judged on, is about the players that we bring in here and the wins and losses in the stadium. And if we're not winning games, I'd gladly take the criticism, but at the same time, I have a job to do, and that's what I'm always focused on.
Again, that was Rand Carthon on the Official Titans podcast. Now, the question there, and I'm not picking on Coach Mack for the question in the slightest. He said, you're bringing in this systematic approach that seems to be working really well. How can you say that? How can you say that it's working really well? I hope that it's working well, but it's brand new. It hasn't been tested. I think Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan have agreed of how they want to move forward with the coaching interviews. Yeah, great. But you haven't drafted. You haven't gone through free agency. You haven't won or lost games yet. You haven't built a team that can win. You haven't learned from some of the losses. How can you say that it's a systemic approach that's working?
Well, because I don't even know what effect shall we call them the incumbents, right? Mike Vrabel and his circle that had been established in there. We really don't know. We haven't had any lengthy discussion from Rand or anybody else on, what were the challenges with that, especially when you had adversity hit, because it's clear that that had to be. I mean, they fired the coach, right? So we know it was broken, right? And stuff didn't go well. So I don't know that that's really the question. What I got out of that, though, it seems like Dave McGinnis, who is he's their radio analyst, but he goes way back as a coach, trusted assistant for the Titans for a long time, assistant head coach, I think, for a while, and a head coach in the league at one point. It does sound like he and Rand have built that sounded like a conversation between two guys that have talked a lot off the air, have gotten to know each other. And Dave McGinnis would seem like a good logical sounding board, right, for a new guy saying, sometimes you need a guy to just vent to.
Yeah.
Right, away from everybody, right? And sometimes the radio guy can be that guy. I've experienced that for sure. Because you're kind of out from the group, but you're watching everything from a different angle. So sometimes that ends up being a really interesting person to just be a sounding board, just to listen, right? Yeah. You're not really offering advice. He's not asking for your advice necessarily, although Dave McGinnis, I'm sure, could offer a lot of advice from his perspective there. I really was – the one thing I didn't hear from this interview that I would have liked to is a little more shedding light on how the interaction with Brinker is going to be, because you now have these two new titles, right? And you can this is another thing I've learned over the years. You can put a title on anybody, right? You can name me the executive, consultant, whatever. It doesn't really matter until we really get in there day to day and it works, right? So now Rand is the executive vice president and general manager, right? And Brinker is a president of football operations, right?
Right.
So it's a little unclear from the title. It could mean a lot of different things.
By title, it looks like Chad Brinker is above Rand Carthon.
Yes. You could, just by reading that and not knowing anything about either person, and you didn't know anything about football, right? You just look at these pieces of paper that have the title and say, oh, this guy. But we know that Rand Carthon has the final say in roster decisions, right? That's been made clear by Amy Adams. So I just would have loved to hear a little bit more of how that is going to work back and forth, because it does seem like they both have a lot of mutual respect for one another, and they have a good idea of what this is going to look like. But the title, it's hard to know until you implement it. And it goes back to what you're kind of saying is this is a new thing. Like it's now being put into place. I'm not even sure that last year has a whole lot of relevance, because this is new, the way they put this together.
Because that's what Rand said. Look, there's a lot of changes. We're going to change how we do things around here. And I think newness is exciting, especially for fans. Newness is exciting. And now they're talking about bringing in analytics. I know a lot of fans are really excited about that. How Rand has final say, what Chad Brinker is doing, bringing in Brian Callahan. Newness is always fun, and it's really easy on February 8th to get really excited about what can be. But just remember, it hasn't been tested yet. Just remember, we don't know if this is the right process. And I'm not saying it's the wrong one. I'm just not going to let myself get too excited about the changes, about the new structure, until we really truly see it tested, and until we see, hey, is there improvement? Does this look like this approach is the better approach? But D-Mase, there was another thing that stood out to you listening to Rand Carthon, and it kind of ties into what Willy's saying about the relationship between Rand and Chad Brinker. We know, based on title, hey, Chad Brinker's going to be doing operations. What exactly does that mean? How does that tie into what Rand does? They both report directly to Amy Adams Strunk. What does that look like? And what does the analytics side of that look like? How does the marriage of analytics and football, what does that really look like? We'll get into that coming up next, what Rand Carthon had to say about that and his approach with analytics while scouting. We'll get into that coming up next, and of course, into your phones as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll take your calls. We'll take your texts. Caroline, Willy, and D-Mase. We are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are broadcasting live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. We will chat with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, at the top of the hour. Also, Jared will kick his show off today right at 2 p.m. with Will Levis. He sat down with Will Levis last night, so we'll hear that right at 2 p.m. That is something that I promise you, you will not want to miss. We're breaking down Ran Carthon's appearance on the official Titans podcast, and one thing that really stood out to me when Coach Mack, and I have not picking on Coach Mack in the slightest, don't get it twisted, but he asked Ran about, hey, this systemic approach that you've been bringing to the Titans seems to be successful, and Ran gets into that a little bit further, but my caution to Titans fans is, let's not quite call it successful yet. Let's earn the success of it before we label it successful, before you play games, before
it's
you
incomplete,
draft.
right?
We don't know.
It's blank. It's a blank canvas.
It's a complete question mark. And maybe right now they feel like they've got a system brewing and a system in place that they think is going to be really successful. I also think they thought that last year's approach was going to be successful.
Every team has hope when they're in the offseason.
Everybody can win the Super Bowl on February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. And there was another thing that stood out to you, D-Mase. And it ties into Willy's question about the connection between Chad Brinker and Ran Carthon. You know, we can read the job duties on a piece of paper. We can see the job titles. But, what does that really mean? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? And I think the biggest thing here is Chad Brinker with the operations side, the analytics side, Ran Carthon, the scouting side, the football side. How do those two pair together? What is the numbers and football marriage look like? Ran Carthon shed a little bit of light on that. This was Ran Carthon on the official Titans podcast.
At the Senior Bowl last week, we had the opportunity. Chad Brinker sat down with us, for quite a while, and it was eye-opening to all of us about what he is bringing. And when we got into the analytics part of it, and the profile part of it starts coming into that analytics part of it. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because we were extremely impressed just with the time, and we spent quite a bit of time with him, and I know that's going to be something that's going to evolve here.
Oh, absolutely. And what that does is it gives us another component of scouting, right? Because, obviously, we're all, I would say, quote unquote, old school football guys, if you will, and we trust our eye and what we see on the tape. But then it gives us moments where you're deep in the training camp, and every team is at 90 men, and you could do the math on how many people that is playing professional football. And let's be honest, God only made so many, good football players, right? But it'll give us a unique situation to be able to use the data to help, hey, here are our key 3 things that we're looking for in a player that has to fit for us, and then being able to use the data to just quickly input that, and then it'll spit us out of a list of every position. And hey, if we get strapped at a place, we know that these 3 guys are immediate profile fits for us, and we don't have to sit there and just pour through so much of the film, because the film has already been watched and we have a grade on them, but then we'll be able to use the data to help drive the decision to get them in here.
D-Mase, that was one clip in particular that you said, this one, listen to this one, I want to talk about this. What stood out to you about that?
Yeah, because we were, when we got a chance to listen to Brinker and then, subsequently had an opportunity to discuss it, we were trying to figure out, ultimately, this analytic thing is the way it seems like everybody's starting to go now. But how do you marry the analytics with the eye test, the old school, and not necessarily even the old school? I think just the brick and mortars of scouting. How do you marry that with this new innovative way, plug it in a computer, and here we go, the Jetsons type of remedy in a sense. How do you marry those two together? Well, Rand is sort of telling you, we're still going to do the brick and mortar. We're still going to do the groundwork in regards to eye tests, watching guys, getting to know guys, putting guys in front of us. But when we're in a position, say in the middle of the season, and we don't have time to be watching all of this tape over again, well, we've already set up this template with analytics where we have these criteria of players that we want that may fit in this system that we have. We put their name in a database, however they sort of, match it all up, and then we type it in the computer and it spits it out. I know it sounds like the Jetsons, and it probably is.
But it saves you time.
It saves you a lot of time. So now we go from, it being 30 players to all of a sudden, because it happens so quickly. A guy goes down in practice, you're in the middle of the week, and it's like, oh my goodness, we got to be able to, okay, pick a guy and go if we don't have him already on our roster. Well, what do? We go to the analytics, and which guys best fit the philosophy that we have as an offense or a defense and overall as a team. Well, we use our analytics, and here are the guys. So I think that's one of the ways, and it seems like that's going to be an important thing to have, especially during the season, where we don't have to go and watch 15, 20 hours of tape. We've already done that. Now we can go into our analytics and say what guy fits what we want to do at this particular position. Okay, here's 3 or 4 guys. All right, now out of these 3 or 4 guys, who now we can talk about them. Now it takes it from being an hour to, and I'm just throwing an hour out there as an arbitrary number, it goes from an hour to 15 minutes. Because now we got the guys, because we would have wasted 45 minutes looking at this guy on film. Well, we've already seen it. Now we put it into the data system, and it spits out 4 or 5 names. Now let's discuss the 4 or 5 guys that we want on our team. It's more efficient to them, I believe, and it saves a lot of time, because in everything that you do, and I think most importantly, football, time is money. And when you need a guy like that, he even talked about the coaching. When Vrabel got fired, they had to be on it right then and there. You ain't got time to be sitting back and twiddling your thumbs like, oh, what about this guy? What about this? Oh, no, we got to know who we want and go after that guy and get him in here, whether it be a player or a coach. So I think that's how they're going to be able to use both analytics and the brick and mortar of just going out and scouting. They're going to marry those two, and hopefully it works. We don't know. It may have worked for other teams, and, maybe San Fran used the same model and it's worked for San Fran. Maybe Cincinnati may use it and it works for them. Kansas City may use it. So if it's working, then it's great. But if it's not working, then it's like, okay, what do we do now?
It goes in line with something we discussed 2 days ago, too, with something that Brinker was talking about when he was saying it's going to take us 3 years to implement all of this stuff that we want to do, this database that Rand just referred to there, because you got to have the right software. You've got to put all the data in. And I'm not a computer guy. I don't know how long it takes. But what was implied in there was they didn't have any of this stuff under the kind of the old school.
Yeah.
Or whatever they had was not nearly what he thinks they need.
Which I didn't think was a surprise.
Right, because the Titans were sort of proudly old school. They did not really go into this whole modern way of doing it. And analytics is again a broad term, but some of it to me is just like being on the cutting edge of how quick you can do it. I'll give you an example. Like when I was playing at Vanderbilt in basketball, our coaches were unbelievable at preparing for the next opponent and breaking down everything that we did. Analyzing, and they would grade the film. That would take them all night. We would play a game. They would look at the tape all night, grade the film, but it was all VHS, right? And it took forever to edit the tape. Like the scouting report of the next opponent, it took a long time. Those guys, I felt for them. Now it's so much easier with the editing on a computer that you can do now. Players themselves can now. I watch the Predators. They can watch every shift that they played right after the game's over. They get handed an iPad. Here are your shifts from tonight. You could be sitting on the bench after a play just happened, and you can go back and look at the play and say, wow, man, I wish I'd have done that or something. Some coaches don't like that you do that right then and there. Like, hey, look at that great play. I made this behind the back pass.
That's not what it's for.
No. We're not doing that. Like, if you're going to use this, let's get something out of it.
Exactly. The offensive coordinator's pointing at the iPad like, you idiot.
So people are always trying to figure out how do we save time? How do we get more efficiency when we evaluate? I'm sure that's part of what they're talking about there. But it sounds like the Titans were behind there. I'm just making that assumption based on what they're saying.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the 3-year thing, because my thing was, it doesn't necessarily mean 3 years for the team, but it means 3 years for us to marry the analytics with the scouting, and so we can all use it in unison. The first time I got introduced to analytics, it was called statistics and analytics. It was my senior year in high school. I'm like, what in the hell is this? Like, I don't want to take this. It's like, because you're used to the geometry and all this other stuff. It's like, what is this? So, and it took, and I'm sure, but luckily for me, you know, I got it, well, I guess not luckily, but I wish I'd have gotten it like my sophomore year, and then I would have been able to sort of build on it and learn from it my sophomore, junior, and senior year. But I jumped right into it my senior year and was like, man, what am I? And we only had it a semester. At least I did.
I'm with you, D-Mase. I dropped it immediately.
Exactly. So because it's like, and so when Brinkert says it's going to take 3 years, I look at it from the standpoint of me being a student. Like, when I first saw it, I'm like, I do not know what this stuff like. This is foreign to me, and I knew I wasn't going to learn even a fraction of it in a semester. I would have needed 6 semesters to sort of get what I needed to get and really understand what analytics and statistics and all that other stuff, how to marry together. And I think that's what Brinker means. He doesn't mean that you're going to have to wait necessarily for 3 years for the team to have success, but it's 3 years for us to marry that with the scouting so you can sort of see some tangible things. We'll see it a little bit here and there, but to see the big picture, it's going to take some time here.
Can I ask a question that's perhaps exposing me a little bit?
What's that?
We use the word analytics all the time. Like, what the hell is that? You say we use analytics to help us save time and to help us in evaluating.
I guess it's just a much more
analyzing numerical values that benefit.
What is any of that? Like what numerical values? Like what are we using? What data? What numbers are we crunching and putting into a computer and spitting out to say that's the right player?
The slang term is in hockey they call it fancy stats, right? You have your basic stats. Like I equate it to like when we were growing up, we had baseball cards, right? On the back of the baseball card, it was at bats, runs, hits, RBIs, home runs, batting average.
Yeah, stats.
Those are the basic stats, right? But analytics is trying to go deeper into what's happening and see if they can give you a clearer picture, illuminate
I know
more
what analytics
what's happening.
Are. Like, I know in theory, like, okay, you're talking analytics, I know what you're referencing, but
how do you plug
for
it
example,
into
we're going to use analytics to help us with injury evaluation. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Sports science.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's sports science.
Like when they run a 40, do you have all these like suction cups onto their body?
Yeah. You do.
Well, essentially, that's what it is.
Player in the league?
Well, no.
And I don't know if that should be under analytics. Like, that's more sports science, but it's also like it's evolution, right? You hear this stuff
It's
like
a lot of words.
They really do think, Chad Brinker really thinks that they can cut down on the injuries. They have been the most injured team, and it was not happenstance that Amy Adams-Strunk put that on the list of we have been the most injured team for 3 straight years. So clearly, Brinker has gone to her somewhere. Somebody's gone to her, and probably Brinker, probably Rand Carthon, saying, "I think we can, if we go to the next step with this stuff, if we evolve with the sports science and stuff, we can cut down on that number."
To what extent can you do that? Because analytics aren't going to tell you if a guy tears his ACL.
Yeah.
You know, like the things just happen. But let's say Julio Jones, he had a torn hamstring every year for the past 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. Well, I could tell you that. I can tell you that he's going to tear his hamstring again. I don't need analytics.
But how
do you eat, how much you sleep,
how do you,
all these things, right?
How do
See,
you
that is what I'm wondering is what goes into this data set to tell you that's an injury risk, that's not an injury risk, that's a guy that's going to work, that's a guy that's not.
And sort of that's the, billion-dollar question, because this is a billion-dollar business. When they start at analytics, that means whatever that is, they felt that it was a need, that it was going to be a plus for the NFL and each individual team. Now, I do understand from your standpoint of, okay, how do they get to whatever that number or that baseline is? How do they, because for concussion, we know how they have a baseline concussion because you take a test prior to the season, so they got a baseline of who you are and how you think and how fast you answer questions. So when you do have a concussion, they can go back to that baseline test and say, well, you need to not play for a little while because your baseline, your numbers are totally off because it's not like it was before.
Right.
Okay, I can understand. That's better. I can better understand that because I took a test. What test am I taking analytic-wise that is going to tell you that, if I do this, I won't be as injured? What analytics are you plugging into that to say, well, if you eat this, you eat that. Well, what do I need to eat? How much do I need to be resting? How do you come to that arbitrary number or that baseline? Because everybody's different. Are you taking these guys at the beginning of the season and you sort of, monitoring them and their sleep habits, telling them to wear certain things so you can get a baseline of what causes them to be injured? Like, okay, you only got, just to say a number, you only got 15 hours of sleep this week. Well, and then you end up getting injured. Another guy got 30 hours of sleep, but he's going. He has a lot of energy. He's going. He's not in it. So are you taking those numbers of my sleep and putting it into the analytic number and saying, this is why maybe you need to get some more sleep?
And are you going to ask every guy in the draft how much they sleep a week?
And that's I don't know how they get to that. I don't know how they get to that baseline.
That's
in
what
regards
I want
to analytics.
What I'm curious about, and I understand when you use analytics. Should we go for it on 4th and 3 or not? Should we go for 2 or not? I understand that you have all these years and every single down and every single game that you can put into a computer, and the computer tells you, okay, here's the risk, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, because the data points that you're putting into this analysis, it's all what has been played on the field. It's whatever factor that you can put in there, you do.
It's not individual based. That is not individual based.
When you're using it for evaluation, exactly. When you're using it to evaluate players, when you're using it for individual by individual, especially coming out of college, when everything is so different, you're playing in different conferences, you have different schedules, you may have played different number of games, different positions.
How do you come up
with
That's the game. That's the game that everybody is playing, is trying to come up with how do we miss less, right? How do we have the right information that we're looking for that will try to separate a guy who plays for, like Jay Cutler, who plays for a weak SEC team that he's trying to elevate, versus Matt Leinart, who's got a loaded NFL roster of USC guys around him.
Yeah.
How do we compare the two? There's always been the questions. That's what the analytics are trying to do, is try to get you a clearer answer, even though there's never a perfect answer.
Yeah, you
right?
can analytic
but it's
yourself
also,
to death.
and then the next level, which is such a big part of it, is I'm paying player X $5 million. Can I get, if he leaves for free agency, can I get the same guy for $5 million or the next guy for the same price, rather than pay that same guy $8 million to stay?
Yeah.
Or, hey, I'm paying this guy $5 million, I'll let him go. I can get something better for $2 million. That's where that's Moneyball. That's the A's, right? The A's were finding guys that were super cheap that were better because they analyzed all the numbers and they said, this guy's actually more effective, and we don't have that much money anyway, so we need to take the cheap guy. But this cheap guy actually is better than the guy we're letting go, who's getting paid by the Yankees $30 million a year, or whatever the number is, right? We're getting that for a fraction. But that's how it works. That's what you're trying to get to.
Use the word analytics all day long.
Yeah.
Like,
it applies to a lot of different things.
What is that? What is analytics? We'll get into your thoughts.
Just wait till you try to get the hockey ones with zone entries and things like that, offense driving plays. It's like, it'll boggle your mind. Like, nobody gets it all.
I'm not built for this. Not built for this. All right, let's get into your thoughts on this coming up next. 615 ESPN NFL analyst will join us at the top of the hour. Will Levis right at 2 p.m. on Stillman & Company. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits tonight as MTSU basketball takes on Liberty on the road. Pre-game at 5:30 p.m., tip-off at 6 with coverage also available on 93.3 Classic Hits app and at 933classichits.com. We're talking Ryan Carthon on the official Titans podcast, and he mentions kind of the marriage between analytics and football. And look, I'm going to expose myself a little bit here. I understand the definition of analytics. I understand what they are. But we're talking a lot about analytics without actually talking about what the heck that even means. What the heck analytics even are.
I'm sure a lot of fans in a given broadcast. I think about this a lot as the Predators announcer, especially with the game moving as fast as hockey, where it's continuous. There's not a lot of. It's not like baseball or football where you have a play, the play stops, and you can talk for a little bit. Hockey, you don't have that. So you get a lot of people that are like, you guys need to introduce more analytics in your broadcast. We have this whole faction of fans that really see where the game is moving. They know it's important. They want to hear more about it. But in hockey, you just don't have that much time to do it. And you've got this other faction of fans like you're going like, what are they talking about? Expected goals.
And I'm not anti-analytic in the slightest, but if this is going to be now more of a part of how you draft, how you evaluate, how you scout, how you game plan, I want to know what goes into that.
But let's make it clear. The Titans are behind the times in this.
And they
the whole
to.
rest of the sports world, I don't care what sport you're talking about. Think about soccer. Think about Nashville SC. They're always looking for players, too. They're not just scouting the college football players.
Yeah.
They're scouting the entire earth.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a player in Africa, you're comparing that guy to a guy in Italy, to a guy in Australia. Like, soccer is played around the world, and if there's a guy that can help Nashville SC at the level they're playing at, they're going to go try to find that guy. But you talk about you need some pretty good evaluation tools for that.
Seriously.
Analytics have become a huge part of soccer.
I think you have to be able to sort of balance the both. If you're asking me, because I don't know a lot about analytics, so I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm just straight analytics and this. No, I'm not, because I don't know enough about it. But what I do know is my eyes, and I know if I look at a player long enough, I can tell you whether, he's a player, nah, he's not.
Yeah. And that's still a pretty damn important aspect of all of this.
But just because I don't know doesn't mean I'm not willing to listen to it and understand it.
Yeah.
That's with anything with me when it comes to me. It's like, you may have a different opinion. I'm not going to sit here and, berate your opinion. But I want to understand why you have that opinion, in a sense.
And that's where I'm at here. I'm not against it. Just tell me more about it. Want to get into your thoughts on this. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Kenny the mailman is on the line with a thought. What's up, Kenny?
Hello, good friends. How are y'all?
Doing great, Kenny.
Excellent. I think Willie is the only person there older enough to remember this. You hear the word analytics, you think new, fresh, exciting, new invention. This goes way back so far. Willie, do you remember Earl Weaver?
Absolutely.
The old baseball manager. He was the first guy. He made charts and graphs of all his players. He platooned. He used bench players that no other manager would use in specific instances where they matched up exactly like he wanted. But also in his autobiography, Willie, he said, I never blankety-blank pitch hit for Frank Robinson.
Yeah.
Which tells you don't use this on your stars. This is a tool. This is information that can help. And I think it's always great to have the most information you can. But it seems like some of these teams are putting Poindexter in the upper deck and they're buzzing coaches and telling them what to do. And it's like, I like the information, but it can't go that far. You take all the information you can use to your advantage, but some people get so wrapped up in their theory they can't see, the forest for the trees.
It's a good point.
Thank you.
Great point, Kenny. Appreciate the call.
It does continue to evolve. It's funny. Poindexter, that's a Revenge of the Nerds reference. Funny movie that you probably couldn't do today.
What you
Revenge
did?
of the Nerds. You probably couldn't make that movie today.
Yeah.
That's why it's on a streaming service.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do it, but man, you may get some pushback.
But you need the people that really do have the deep understanding of the math, which I don't, right? But you need that person to, as we've talked about, communicate. That's what the beauty of Chad Brinker is. I think he's got a graduate degree, on the business part of it, the math part of it, but he was also a player that was coached in the eye test part. So that's a good blend, right? So now he can speak both languages. You find people that the coaching staff respects it. Like if you bring just picture Poindexter from the movie. Yeah. If he's coming down there telling Mike Vrabel, this is what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Is that coach going to listen to Poindexter? No, he's not going to. But if you bring somebody in between that's like a Chad Brinker that's got the background in both, and you put it in terms that the coach can understand, the coach might say, okay, I'm coming around to this. That makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think Chad said as much, when he did the OTP podcast. He's sort of just the liaison because what was the lady name they hired to come on
she's from the Rams.
Yeah, to be their analytic, sort of person. Uh-huh. And then it's Chad Brinker, and then how do we disseminate her information? Because like you said, Willie, if she walks in there and start talking to these coaches, they're like, whoa, pump your brakes. You lost me the second word you said, so pump your brakes. Well, she tells Chad's bringing in, he brings it in the form to Rand and the coaches that everybody can understand. Not that, these men are not highly intelligent, because they are. But just because you're highly intelligent doesn't mean you know everything. Yeah. So I need to have that liaison to be able to talk to her. Okay, I get it. How do I then disseminate it to the coaches and the GM so they can understand? Because if you walk through the door, after about 5 minutes, you're going to lose them.
Yeah, eyes start to get a little bit glossy.
They're going to get tired very quickly.
All right, coming up next, we'll catch up with ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. We'll kind of get a vibe of what's going down on Radio Row, the conversation surrounding the Tennessee Titans, and, of course, we'll hit on the Super Bowl with Tim as well. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Tune into Robbie and Rex Road tomorrow morning from 6 to 9 a.m. on 102.5 The Game for details on how you can win tickets to see Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band at Nissan Stadium on August 3rd. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game and the Game Nashville app. Just a reminder, Will Levis will sit down with Jared right at 2 p.m. on Stillman & Company, so make sure that you are tuned in for that. Titans quarterback Will Levis at 2 p.m. right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. But joining us now is ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, I'm assuming you are in Vegas?
Vegas, currently in New York City. Little get up this morning with Greeny and my guy Damian Woody and Harry Douglas, former Titan.
All right. I would assume that you're getting a little bit more sleep in New York City than you would in Las Vegas.
But New York is the city that never sleeps. Remember that.
City that never sleeps, but maybe sleeps a little bit more than Las Vegas for the Super Bowl.
And Get Up is an early show, so that's an early production call, as you guys can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I shouldn't assume there.
Yeah.
But Tim, appreciate you for joining us, even with the early morning wake up call that you had today. You know, one of our colleagues is in Vegas on Radio Row and has asked several people whether it's Tony Romo or whether it's Rich Gannon. A lot of their evaluations of Will Levis have been, you know, like the tools, heck of an arm. It's good that he's gotten some experience in his rookie season, but he has a tendency to turn the ball over. But he needs to learn when to slide. He needs to learn how to kind of fine-tune his fire. What's the difference? What is the difference between Will Levis taking the good and turning that into great, and Will Levis maybe never really coming to fruition?
Yeah. So I think it's development in terms of decision making. I think that comes along with learning an offense, being coached in an offense, and look, the decision making. Like if we were to just look at Brock Purdy, who's going to play in a Super Bowl, who does not have the physical ability that Will Levis has, that's a differentiator, and that's what matters. And I think that, you know, part of the debate about Brock Purdy and is he a game manager or not is that I think most people feel like Kyle Shanahan is a really good offensive coach who calls good plays, who they've put good players around the quarterback, and because of that, you know, they have a quarterback that, you know, probably doesn't have the physical skills that most starting quarterbacks have, but he's playing at a really, really high level because he's a good decision maker, he's accurate, and, you know, a bunch of other things around him that have allowed him to develop in just his second year.
ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck is with us. Tim, I don't know if you heard, but Brock Bowers was at the Super Bowl. It was on Radio Row yesterday, rather, and he was on with Mike Florio and Chris Sims. They asked him, "Where do you want to go? You know, where do you want to get drafted?" And he said, "The Tennessee Titans." And of course, obviously, they made headlines in Nashville. But your thoughts on Brock Bowers as a tight end prospect? And I know that tight end is not necessarily traditionally a top 10 pick, not a premier pick, especially with the Titans with as many positions of need. But if the Titans did go Brock Bowers at 7, do you think that he could be a game-changing type of player?
Oh, I definitely do, you know, because he's one of those players that he's a tight end, but he has receiver skills, and that's, I think, where you start to create like the biggest matchup issues in the National Football League with guys like him that can, you know, that they're just their versatility and their ability to separate. Like I think that he's going to be a guy that gets drafted high because of his skill set. And, you know, it was interesting. Most people kind of don't say anything about, hey, where do you want to go? They give this like politically safe answer. And Brock Bowers like, yeah, Tennessee Titans. Like, that's where I want to be. Put me there. Like, I thought that was a little bit interesting.
Yeah, because you never truly get that, Tim, when a guy is asked that question. It's like, man, listen, at this point, just somebody draft me. That's all I care about. But it's good to see, you know, the honesty in the young kid to say, listen, if I do have an opportunity, yeah, Tennessee would, and I can see why. It's not too far from the University of Georgia, so if I don't know if he's from the Georgia area.
He's from Napa.
Yeah, he's from California,
Yeah.
so like, wouldn't he say like
all places.
like San Fran or somebody else? But I guess San Fran picks too low for him, so he wants to get picked higher. We're talking with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Innsworth Tigers.
Here we go.
Tim, we had a discussion on analytics, and listen, in asking this question, I don't expect you to get into the weeds with this because it's a lot in regards to analytics. But how do you understand analytics to be, and do you, even as a high school coach, are you using it in some form?
I think that, so in terms of analytics, I guess what I'd say is, you need the data in order to, to have the information, right? So in the college and program, you think about the stuff that's been tracked, and so now we have information on it, right? So, like, I think that would be what's different in college or pro football than, like, is different in college football. Like, you're not getting the same exact information. So take an example of, you're down 14 points and it's late in the fourth quarter. You score a touchdown. Hey, go for 2, because the likelihood of you getting the football back and then coming down and scoring again to tie the game, like, now you've taken that part of out of the equation. You're more likely to win the game, right? There's info and data on that at those levels. Now, like, it's not the same in other sports, right? Or excuse me, at other levels. So I would just say, for like, how do I look at that? I think that there is so much information now that is tracked that, listen, perception and reality, or what we should do in this moment versus another moment in terms of going for it or kicking a field goal or whatever it may be. Yeah, I think that all of those things need to be a big part of the planning process. And then even beyond that, like, down to smaller details of, look, we have successful with these types of runs, out of these formations. We have success on these passing concepts in these situations. Or, look, we don't have success bringing these types of blitz pressures in these moments. There's so much information. There's so much information that I think that you'd be crazy not to pay really, close attention to it.
And you're right in regards to that, because I was just interested to hear your answer, because when we say analytics, we think situations like you brought up, like fourth down, you go for it, you don't go for it, or this point in the game, we choose to do this instead of that because the analytics says that we probably will have a better outcome. But listening to Chad Brinker and listening to Rand Carthon, they're choosing not only to use it from that standpoint, but also to use it to evaluate players, to cut down the timing on, hey, if guy gets hurt on Wednesday, we need to get a guy in here by Thursday or Friday, and we don't have time to watch film. We've watched all the film we need to watch. Now, let's use our analytics, plug it in however you want to do it, George Jetson type of thing, and it spits out 4 or 5 people. I think that's going a little bit further than what you said, and even what we thought, because when we're asking ourselves that question, Tim, it's the same thing as your answer. Like, okay, on third down, what point of the game and point of the season we do this in regards to a game?
Well, but and I think I was probably thinking of you asking it to me like from a coaching perspective.
Yes.
But I would say that, like, I had a conversation with somebody about guys not running 40s at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, we used to care. We don't care anymore. And I was like, oh, really? Why don't you care anymore? He's like, well, because we can measure how fast somebody is now. Like, we actually have somebody running, 21.4 miles per hour. Like, in a game, we know he's fast. Like, I don't need to see him run a 40. In fact, we can gather the information now actually to know how fast he actually runs on a football field.
I wonder where Jerry Rice would have been picked if you had
right?
if you had more of that data when he was at Mississippi Valley State. That's an interesting question.
And what's interesting, Willie, like kind of to that point, like, some of it is being grabbed from outside, but like with all of these wearable technologies now, there are a lot of programs, and kind of to the question you asked earlier, D-Mase, like even in high school, like my daughter has worn, a catapult device playing lacrosse, and we're like, oh, she ran 7 miles in this game, and she had, 30 different, bursts of 30-yard sprints, because she's playing in the middle of the field. And it was like, ooh, that was a lot of running. I just remember seeing that information and thinking, well, that should help her figure out, not her specifically, but like that should help. Like, how should you train if that's the type of running that you do, right? Like you should train differently. You should train for what you're going to be expected to do in a game. And so, yeah, I think that it helps on so many different levels.
So, Tim, I'm reading about the practice field for the 49ers, and I haven't gotten D-Mase's take on this, but it just seems like of all weeks to have something like this happen, the Super Bowl, and I don't even know what it is about the field. I've read about it. I guess it's a little spongy. It doesn't feel right. But to have that happen, I do wonder what effect is that having actually on the 49ers, knowing that just the littlest glimpse of this story has dozens and dozens of reporters trying to find out more, right? It just becomes it mushrooms. So what effect do you think this is having?
Well, I mean, I think it's just probably adding to like some of the distrust that players have with the league in terms of player safety. I mean, I think that's, ultimately, like, I don't think fans care. I don't think, I think in a lot of ways, like, people generally probably don't care all that much about it other than, the players who think, like, how is this possible? How is it to get to the biggest game of the year where just the amount of money that's being generated from this event, and we can't even get what would it cost to have a perfect field in a climate like Las Vegas? Like, how much would it really cost to make sure that that's the case for this week? Like, I'm not I don't know. I mean, my lawn is not great. So I'm not the guy to ask, but like, I don't, like, it's pennies. It's fraction of pennies probably in the grand scheme of things for the National Football League. So I just think that's the shocking thing to me.
But it's also like just time taken away from your normal routine. Like, they clearly looked around and said, is there another field, or what's the alternative? Like, okay, you can go to where the Chiefs are practicing, but you've got to come in earlier when they're not there. And Kyle Shanahan's having to put all this stuff together in his mind, saying and he arrived at the conclusion, well, we'll just stay and deal with it. It's not perfect though. Like, but that's a lot of energy and thought taken away from preparing for the Super Bowl.
No doubt. And I'm sure D-Mase can even expand on like other things that come up in a Super Bowl week where you're like, yeah, like it would have been great to not have to deal with that. Look, I know, look, the year my brother was in a Super Bowl, they actually got into a car accident driving to media day. It's like, well, how's that for a distraction?
My goodness.
Alexander, Walter Jones, you're starting quarterback in a car accident. Yeah, all those things are distractions, and I think the teams that are able to kind of deal with it and not carry that over into the game, certainly play better. And I think the part of it that, I don't know, is probably alarming is the fact that, like, that shouldn't be. like how does that a distraction? Like how is that not something that, like, somebody has been on for over a month of, let's make sure that this surface is perfect?
So, Tim, let's go back to Purdy, because I think he's such a central figure in this Super Bowl, because I guess during the season, I didn't have him on my fantasy team or anything, but I wasn't aware of how dominant his stats were, right? This is a guy that when you throw out game manager, he is number one in almost all of the key stats. Like, you want to talk about just your basic stats and that next level analytics stat. He's number one in almost everything. It's unbelievable. But if he has a bad game, I wonder how much just the anecdotal, he didn't do well in the one big game, is going to make him be perceived more like Jimmy Garoppolo. When Garoppolo has never had a season like he has statistically. Purdy's numbers are lights out.
Yeah, they're not close. So to kind of give you, to piggyback on that, in 2019 when Garoppolo went to the Super Bowl, in the 2 games leading, that preceded the Super Bowl, Garoppolo threw 27 passes. Brock Purdy has thrown 70. Garoppolo threw for 208 yards. Purdy, 519. Garoppolo, -1 yards rushing in those games. Brock Purdy, 62. Think how big his rushing yards were in the Green Bay game, in the NFC Championship game. 29 first downs for Purdy as an offense versus 14 for Garoppolo. Like, they're not the same. To me, when people are doing that, it feels like a lazy comparison. And I would say this to your point about hey, it's easy for Purdy, right? Like, in terms of, hey, he's just throwing the ball to guys short and they're taking off and running it. Okay. Here's a comparison that I, got from, guys I'm working with this morning on Get Up. So, yards after catch, Patrick Mahomes per game. Patrick Mahomes 154. Brock Purdy 122. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. Like, I was looking at air ball in the air. Like, people used to say that about Montana, right? It was all the quick tosses and stuff. But dude, the guy is unbelievable, right? So Purdy, it is a misperception, right? That he doesn't get the ball down the field, because the stats do say otherwise.
Percentage of throws, attempts behind the line of scrimmage. Patrick Mahomes, 32% of his throws behind the line of scrimmage. Brock Purdy, 21%. Like, average depth of target, Purdy's is deeper than Mahomes. Like, all of it. Like, and I would just say this: when you watch the NFC Championship game, he made, I think there's this perception of, hey, he's just in this offense, and it's everything is dialed up perfectly, and it's, a 5-step drop, 1 hitch, ball's out. 3-step drop, throw a slant, Debo catch and run forever. And that's not reality. I think there are probably 6 to 8 plays in the NFC Championship game where it's Purdy creating outside of the design of the offense. And really, if it were Lamar or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert, everyone's like, oh my gosh, can you believe he's doing that? And it just looks different because Brock Purdy looks like he could be D-Mace's accountant. But the reality is he's the quarterback in the Super Bowl.
It really does look like
Hey, listen, if he's good with money and stuff like that, then yes, he could be. Knowing that I'm very, stingy when it comes to stuff like that. I like to keep it. Tim, the Titans have the 7th pick in this year's draft, and I was listening to your boy Chase, your best friend, and Joe this morning talk about whether, do you go with the wide receiver or do you go with the O-line? And, me being a former wide receiver, you would think, oh, Mason would go with the wide receivers. But I know how this league is built, regardless of how or where it's trending toward, scoring a lot of points. But you can't score points if your quarterback is on his back 50% of the time. It's hard to do that. So if you were in the position that the Titans were in, and I know Brian Callahan has a history, or he has, a history of being in this situation, whether they draft the offensive lineman or they draft a receiver. Well, they chose to draft the receivers, and they didn't go wrong. Neither, and the team that drafted the offensive lineman obviously didn't go wrong as well. But if you're in a situation like this in today's NFL, would you go, knowing the Titans' history, would you go wide receiver at the 7th pick, say if that said guy is there, or do you go with the surefire, potential Hall of Famer, offensive tackle in this year's draft, because one would say, well, we need to score points, but then I'm on the side of the ledger that says, well, you can't score too many points if your quarterback is consistently on his backside.
Yeah, I still think you have to build inside out. Like, I think you build, from the football. I mean, I think that's what you do. And like, everybody loves great wide receivers. You get a elite receiver. They can start to dictate coverage and, changing the ways you get defended, which can help other people. So, like, I'm in full acknowledgement of that. But I do believe that, like, when you look at teams, like, you go back to Philadelphia going to the Super Bowl last year, like, it was because they were so dominant at the line of scrimmage. And I still think, like, as you're building something, it should be inside out, meaning close to the ball to further away from the ball. I do think that is the right way and probably the safest way to build your organization.
ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, appreciate your time today, as always, and we'll chat with you next week.
Right. Thanks. See you guys.
Appreciate it, Tim. Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. He is the absolute best. We'll react to what he had to say coming up next. Plus, I had to get D-Mase's thoughts on what came out during our show yesterday. And Willy was telling me something. I'm trying to focus on what Willy is saying, but I was like, if this is true, we have to investigate this. And we'll react to that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
All right, let's talk loan pronto. If you have a mortgage rate in the threes, you know as well as I do, or maybe you don't. Look, for a long time, I was clueless about these things. But if you're a homeowner and you have a mortgage rate in the threes when the mortgage rates were lower, you don't want to mess with that. But you might be sitting there going, but I need some cash. I need to find a way to start a home improvement project or pay some other bills that must get paid here in the near future. Well, Loan Pronto can help you. You can use Loan Pronto and their Express Equity line of credit. You can get the cash you need in a matter of days. Leave that primary mortgage intact. So tap into your home's equity. They can get you thousands of dollars in just a matter of days. And then you can address those financial needs that you have. Call Loan Pronto now and find out more. 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780. Or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781.
I know you can't control it, but if you could, where would you want to go?
Whoever wants to take me. I mean, it's hard to say. I'd love to go to.
He wants the Niners to get rid of Kittle, and then he wants to go to the 49ers.
He's almost saying
I'd be all right.
Let him say it. I'd be all right with going to the Tennessee Titans. I mean, I liked it down in the Georgia, Tennessee area. I thought it was cool, but that'd be a cool spot to be.
You hear that, Titans?
You know you just made waves in Nashville by going on Pro Football Talk and saying you want to play for the Titans. So why exactly you want to play for the Titans?
I think it'd be cool. I mean, I've been up there a couple times to Tennessee, and I kind of would love to stay in the Southeast. So yeah.
That was former Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. So that first clip,
signing the bat signal to Nashville. Two-tone blue up in the sky.
I'm surprised he wasn't wearing two-tone blue. He was on Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio and Chris Sims, and of course they're throwing up the same question that I'm sure they do with every prospect, and every prospect responds with, I want to go wherever they want me, wherever I can contribute. Brock Bowers saying, no, I want to go to the Titans. And, good on Jared for following up there, and he said, I like Nashville. Nashville's cool. Southeast is cool.
Yeah.
D-Mase, from your perspective, because what we've talked a lot about tackle, receiver, rightfully so. Would you be able to live with the Titans taking Brock Bowers? No, not just any tight end. Brock Bowers with the 7th overall pick.
Brock Bowers may have just well been, because I look at him in the same breath as I looked at Calvin Johnson. When Calvin Johnson was at Georgia Tech, Calvin Johnson, it was debatable between me. Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones coming out. But Calvin Johnson was probably the best receiver at that point that I had seen, like, in college the last 10 years. He had, like, you just knew watching him, like, this dude is just going to be, when he gets in the league, he's going to dominate, because that's how Calvin Johnson was at Georgia Tech. He was a matchup problem for any and everybody. It was sort of like Fitzgerald. When Fitzgerald was at Georgia Tech, it was just a matchup problem. I look at Brock Bowers in that same fashion. Like, I don't think there's been a tight end in the last 10 years that has been as good and as dominant as Brock Bowers has been in college. If there is one, y'all can throw him out there.
Kyle Pitts would be the only one that comes to mind, but even he, I don't think, was as important to Florida as Brock Bowers was to Georgia.
But Brock Bowers is he's different. Yeah, he's just different. He reminds me so much of the kid out of Jimmy Graham, out of St. Louis. I mean, not St. Louis, New Orleans, where he's this hybrid, wide receiver. Like, he could legitimately, if you put him out there wide receiver, he can play wide receiver. But you put him at tight end, he's damn near the best tight end. He is the best tight end in the country in regards to college football. Now, that's the play part. I'm going to go back to what he said. I'm like Barry Trotz. I don't want you to come here and retire. I don't want you to be here because you like the city. I don't want that. I want you to be here because you want to make a difference on that ball team, because you feel that you can go out there and play at a high level. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear you liking the city. Hell, you may like a lot of cities that you go to. I like a lot of cities, but why do I choose to still live here in Nashville? It's different from me liking the city, me liking Dallas or someplace like that. Do I want to live there? Probably not. I would rather be here. So tell me why you want to be here. Nashville, for a 20-something-year-old, early 30, it's great. But that's not why you're here. You're not here for the nightlife. You're not here for the honky-tonks. You're here to be on the Titans team and to make this team better.
Bronx.
Exactly. That's what I want to hear. And if you listen to Rand and you listen to Brinker, but more importantly Rand, you would, if you answered that question in that fashion of Rand Carthon, he may pause. Not to say he still wouldn't draft you, but he may pause. Because my pause is, so you want to be in Nashville because Nashville's a great city? Is that why you want to be here? Because I don't expect you to be out in the city much, especially not during the season. I expect you to spend all of your time in that building. So, again, why do you like Nashville? Why do you want to get drafted by Nashville? That's where I'm coming from. But as far as the talent.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, as far as the talent, he's the best tight end that I've seen over the last 10 years that have come out of college.
Better than Pitts?
Yeah, I think he's better than Pitts. I really do. It's just he has something. He has that that dog in him. He just has it. Like this kid, he reminds me of Steve McNair from this standpoint. He just seems like just a country boy that just wants to just put me out there and I'm gonna play. Just give me the ball, I'm gonna play. I don't need to be flashy. You can put me in a pair of old school Pumas and I can go out there and play. You could put me in old school uniforms because I am just a football player. But in this situation with the Titans, would I draft that tight end or would I draft that pass catcher or would I draft that tackle? Because I know where the Titans have been throughout their history of offensive linemen, they pride themselves from Bruce to B-Hop to Taylor. Who else did they have? The two tackles. I don't know why I'm forgetting their names now.
Big Country?
Yeah, Big Country.
Michael Roos?
Michael Roos. They've had
David Stewart was the Big Country.
Big Country. Michael Roos was the left.
Those were
the left
two pretty
tackle.
good ones for sure.
So their history of this team, they've had good to great bookend tackles, or they've had that great tackle. I want to get back to that. I want to get back to the Taylor Lewan being on the left side, the Bruce Matthews being on the left side when he did play tackle, the B-Hops playing left tackle, the Roosters. I want to get back to that. I know what the NFL is, but I know the success of this, even when I was at my height, the success came from that offensive line because they gave Mack and Neal enough time to throw the ball down the field. So that's how I look at the game, sort of like Tim. Build up this offensive line, and you're going to be able to get that pass catcher. You will. You will get him. I promise you. You will get him. But where the Titans have been and how much, agony and just suffering the fans have watched over the last 2.5 seasons of this offensive line being horrendous, why in the hell would you go get a pass catcher first? I don't understand that logic. Why would you go get a pass catcher first when this Titans team for the last 2 years, they got 2 quarterbacks hurt? 2.
And
Why would I not go to an offensive lineman?
I find it very interesting. We just had Tim on, a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Jared talked with Rich Gannon earlier this week on Radio Row in Las Vegas, a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Both of them said, yeah, go get your tackle.
My thing is, listen, it works.
And it depends on how the draft goes.
It works in certain situations. Like, you bring up the Cincinnati. Well, it was a little bit different. Why? Because their quarterback had proven he was the best quarterback in college, and they knew he more than likely was going to be a superstar. Like this was going to be the dude. So we need to go get him another dude on the outside for him. We can possibly hold up on the offensive line. But what did that do? That got them knocked down one play shy of getting the first down and continuing the drive in the Super Bowl. See, people don't talk about that when you don't have an offensive line. And, yeah, you got those pass catchers, but if I can't get them to the pass catchers, now everybody's screaming, you should have got an offensive lineman. You should beef up your offense. I know where this Tennessee Titans team has been at their best, whether it's Eddie George or Chris Johnson or Derrick Henry. All 3 of those backs, what did they have in common? A damn good offensive line. That got them far.
It's the backbone.
Exactly. So to me, you build up this offensive line however you're going to build it. Pass catchers nowadays, I'm going to tell you this. Pass catchers come a dime a dozen. They do. Now, there are some that are better than others. I get that. But the way these offenses are built, prime example, you look at what they're doing in L.A. with the Rams. Those guys will never leave that system. You know why they'll never leave that system? Because if they go outside that system, they may not be as good. But that system affords them, it gets them open in space so they can then catch the ball when nobody around. They do make tough catches at times. I get it.
They kind of no-name receivers, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, coming out of college. I didn't know who those people were.
So they get in this system and they flourish. Why? Because the system affords them to flourish, okay? In this situation, I can find me a pass catcher. Now I gotta, do you got dog in you or do you not? Now that's a different thing. So I can find me a pass catcher, but I need to build up this offensive line first, because if I don't build up this offensive line, we have nothing. And the fans are going to keep on screaming, get an offensive line, get an offensive line. And we're going to keep on screaming on the radio, get an offensive line. Well, you had a chance to. You had a chance to get the best offensive tackle in this year's draft that many look as a potential all-pro, even further than that. So if you got a chance to get that guy, get him.
And look, I'm with you. Like, everything that I've read about Joe Alt, everything I've heard about Joe Alt is if he's there at 7, you take Joe Alt, especially with the need that you have at left tackle. I'm not married to a certain position just because I'm not in the business of reaching just for a certain position.
But would it be reaching if you get Joe Alt? It's a need and it's a need and the best player on the draft, probably.
But if he's gone and your next best evaluated offensive lineman isn't until like 12, well, you're not going to take the 12th best player at number 7. You would take maybe a receiver that falls or Brock Bowers or whatever it might be. But I'm with you that if that tackle's there, you take him. But you know what people that disagree with us would say?
What?
Look at Jamar Chase and the Cincinnati Bengals.
You can't do that. You can't, because I can show you other examples where it don't work.
Yeah, totally. And so if the Bengals took Penei Sewell,
it'd still be.
I think they would still be pretty good. I don't know that. I'm not going to revise history, but I think that is the perfect example of opposition. Look what Jamar Chase did in Cincinnati. They ended up in the Super Bowl, even with 9 sacks in a playoff game.
But what happened on the most important down?
They got helped a lot by 3 turnovers by Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, but I'm saying in the Super Bowl.
When
that guy was trying to get it to that all-world receiver, which Chase is damn good. I will admit that. I'm not going to slight him. He's damn good. But I always knew that if those big guys wasn't blocking for Steve, how am I then getting the football? It's just, it's build your team from the inside out. And I think, I don't know if it was Rand or Brinkert, they sort of talked about that, building a team from the inside out. And I think in today's, even with the offenses being the way they are, you got to build this thing. There's a reason why the Detroit Lions went from one of the worst teams to one of the best teams. They built that offensive line. They really did. And they got them, I'm not going to say they got them a quarterback because they had a quarterback before. But you know what that quarterback before didn't have? A good offensive line. He had the best receiver on the planet. Stafford had the best receiver on the planet. Did they ever make it to the playoffs?
Maybe
one time.
Yeah.
Listen, everybody. He had the best receiver on the planet in Calvin Johnson, and they made one playoff appearance.
Didn't win a game.
That should tell you that offensive line is a tad bit more important than that star receiver. See, that's an example I can give you when they give you the Chase one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's examples, I think, on both sides.
Exactly.
But I'm with you. If the tackle's there, you take the tackle. If the tackle's not there, trade back. Take
trade
another
back.
Position.
Yeah.
You got options. All right, let's get into your thoughts on this coming up next, because we've got a bunch of thoughts in our phone and text lines. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025 and 1063. The Game is officially inviting you to our first ever Super Saturday. But we've been talking about this over the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, with the weather this weekend, we are going to have to postpone that event. So all of the tickets, if you've already bought them, they will be honored whenever we reschedule this event. We just haven't quite rescheduled it yet. So just again, Super Saturday, which was originally scheduled for this Saturday at New Heights Brewery, that will be postponed. We'll keep everybody updated for when when we will reschedule that event. Elliot Friedman at the top of the hour. Will Levis sits down with Jared at 2 p.m. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063 The Game.
in a game where we got battered up front, and Joe got sacked 9 times and probably hit 15, and we really, outside of one drive and one explosive play, didn't really do much in that game. And we get a turnover late in the game, and now they're going to play 2-man, and Jamar goes and wins versus 2-man and wins the game. And so those moments have always stuck with me. When a push comes to shove, do you want to have someone that can go score touchdowns and go win versus tight coverage? And in that debate, the Sewell-Chase debate, which was, again, 2 players that you knew, whichever one we take is probably going to be a 10-time Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro style player. And Panay was fantastic, and we loved him. And Jamar was fantastic, and we loved him. And the debate went back and forth, and which one do we need? And I landed on the Jamar Chase side because I saw what he could do for our offense. The difference there to me is, like, Jamar was an elite player. And in that moment for our team in Cincinnati, the elite player that can score touchdowns versus the elite player that can protect the quarterback with the style of quarterback that we had and the style of offense that we ran, we took the guy that could score touchdowns.
That was Titans head coach Brian Callahan on with Stillman and Company the week that he was announced as the Titans head coach.
Compelling argument.
Elite player that can score touchdowns versus elite player that can't score touchdowns. Now, that worked out for the Bengals. It does not mean that is the formula or the blueprint to getting to the Super Bowl in your young quarterback second year. But I do want to get your thoughts on this. That's what we're breaking down. D-Mase, receiver, says, hey, you got to take a left tackle. Can't get the ball to your playmakers if your quarterback's on the ground. But I want to get your thoughts on that. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. If you have a thought, Graham Texan says, I agree with D-Mase. Before all the coaching searches began, I was always convinced they should have reached out to an ex-Titans player that impacted this team, like David Stewart, Michael Roos, Munchak, to get us some big boy linemen that could protect us. I mean, whoever does it, whether it's a former player or not, you need to get somebody that's going to be able to protect the quarterback.
Yeah, you're going to have to. And listen, Brian Callahan, Coach Callahan, brought up that situation. I think he was referring to the Tennessee game.
The divisional round. Yeah,
the divisional round. He was referring to that. And I get, because what did he say? And again, people miss what he said. They only probably caught the end. Yeah, Jamar Chase covered 2-man. He beats 2-man. Well, I blame that more so on the defense than anything. Like, that's the one guy that you need to be paying attention to is that guy right there so he doesn't catch the ball, because we know what? We will get to the quarterback quickly. Brian Callahan said it. He said, listen, we weren't doing anything. With these great group of receivers, we were not doing anything in the game. Our quarterback was getting knocked down, beaten, battered. And then on that one play, he hit Jamar Chase for a gain of, I think it was like 15, to push them in position to kick a field goal.
The game-winning field goal.
A game-winning field goal. He didn't mention the Super Bowl where that offensive line got beat very quickly.
Yeah, it looked like Joe Burrow almost got hurt
again.
Absolutely.
He didn't mention that part. He talked about the divisional round. Well, you wouldn't have had to be at that point had your offensive line been better. If your offensive line had been better, your quarterback wouldn't have been beaten, battered, and bruised by Jeffrey Simmons. I think Jeff got about 8 or 9 hits on the quarterback. They got sacked, 9 times?
9 times.
So had you had an offensive line, you would have been able to protect your quarterback better. But you didn't. And it got your quarterback hit. And then it subsequently got your quarterback hit on the last drive, 4th and 3. 4th and 3 or 4. You couldn't hold up for 2 seconds. Nope, because your offensive line was bad. And you couldn't get it to that all-world, receiver in Jamar Chase. So, hey, listen, other people have other opinions, and I get it. I understand that.
This is what I don't know, because I don't know how to evaluate an offensive lineman. But I would be curious about just your grade. Right, you probably have your way of coming up with a grade. Like, is Alt? I know it's attractive because you have this glaring weakness, and you could. Everybody says you can plug him in day one. Yeah. Well, plugging him in day one is nice, but I'm more concerned is he going to be a high level offensive tackle for a long time, Or is he just good enough right now? Like, I hope he also has the very high ceiling, because we all know about Bowers. He seems like D-Mase, that gets my attention when you say he's the best you've seen, better than Pitts, better than these other guys. He changes the game. Like, that's intriguing to me. Like, are we looking just to fix our biggest problem on day one, or are we looking like who is going to be the best player for the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that's a Bill Callahan thing. That if he comes in and he's ready now, he can help you now. What is he going to be in 5 to 10 years? I mean, ideally, he'd still be your left tackle. But, I mean, also ideally, he'd be playing at a higher level year 7 than he would year 1.
Yeah, you want a star left tackle.
And that's all due to coaching and development.
Yeah, you want a guy that's good enough in day one, ideally, but also is going to grow into a stud. You know, just like, oh, hey, we've got a starter there. Like, it won't take much for him to look better than the couple guys that have been at that position the last couple years.
Yeah.
But that's really not the end game, right? You want a winning team that has a great left tackle if you're going to use that pick. Otherwise, long term, if we believe that Bowers is that special unicorn kind of guy, then you got to look at the unicorn and figure out, hey, look up, I'll get the left tackle someday. And I get your point too, D-Mase, but that's why my question is Alt okay, good, we could plug this hole, or Alt is a stud too. Like, what's your grade compared to all the tackles you grade every year? Like, is he grade way up there? Is he a stud, or is he just, hey, he's ready to plug in there right now? Ready to plug in would mean more to me if my team was really good. But this team is not. This team needs a lot of studs.
The key to me is, where do you grade them? Because let's take the tackles, for example. Let's say that you have Joe Alt. I'm just using that as an example. Let's say you give Joe Alt a 97. You give Ola Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State, like an 82. Well, if Joe Alt's off the board, you're not going to take Ola Fashanu with the 7th overall pick if your evaluation is so much different. If you view Joe Alt as so much better of a tackle than the other one, you're not going to take the tackle just because you need a tackle. And if you have Brock Bowers graded much better than Joe Alt and they're both available, well, then maybe you're going to take Brock Bowers because that's a higher graded player. Even though it's not at a position of immediate dire need right now, ASAP emergency, but you got ASAP emergency need right now, good players.
Yeah, you do. But I think if Brock Bowers is there, and you say you do take him, I think there might be a bigger uproar than if you drafted, a Dunze or, because we figure by 7, Marvin Harrison Jr. will be gone, even though some people do have a Dunze rated a little bit higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, yeah, okay. I would rather get that guy that has played in the Big Ten, a little bit tougher football than out west. Dunze's a damn good wide receiver, but I think I'd take Marvin Harrison Jr. in the pedigree over that. But I think if you take the tight end, it would be an uproar because of the perception. You took a tight end where you should have took a receiver, even though they both catch the ball.
If they're worried about perception, we got a lot of bigger problems on our hands.
I think that's what it would be with some people. Like, they would like it, but they're like, man, you could have drafted, a Dunze, a guy on the outside. Why? Because they're more flashier, even though Brock Bowers would come in and do a hell of a job.
And you're going to have that every single draft. Every year, you're going to look at, well, who went after, who went 25, who went Mr. Irrelevant, who's now quarterbacking in the Super Bowl. You're going to have that every year. Just who's the best player? Who's the best player available? Because you got a lot of positions of need. All right, Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast and Sportsnet will join us coming up next. We had a really great conversation yesterday with Dimitri Filipovich, the host of the PDO Cast. Wanted to run some things by Elliot that we heard from Dimitri, and we'll catch up with Elliot coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game and The Game Nashville app. We are streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. Coming up at 2 p.m., right at the top of the hour, Jared will sit down with Will Levis from Radio Row in Las Vegas. I know that it's going to be a great conversation, so looking forward to that. Make sure you tune in right here, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, right at 2 p.m. Joining us now is Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast and Sportsnet. Elliot, appreciate you as always. We were chatting with your pal Dmitry Filipovich yesterday. We were kind of throwing some, future of the goaltending position in Nashville questions around. I asked him, what do you think is the going rate for an elite goaltender? Whenever the Predators have this conversation, inevitably with UC Saros at the end of this season, what would a fair figure be? And Dmitry said $5 million. I was kind of surprised by that. That felt a little bit low to me.
Yeah, and his overall thought too was it's hard to get equal value back because it's something we talked about with you, Elliot, a few weeks ago. Is that there's a lot of good goalies. There's not a lot of great goalies, but a lot of people are like, well, I'll find the good goalie. I'm not going to give you so much for the great goalie because we can win otherwise.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you this. I think there's some people who really do believe that, and I think there's some people who just say that. Look, I think it depends on what you've got in front of them. You take a look at the thing is, though, one of the issues that I think that really has happened is that how many A-level goalies are really left? Like, there used to be like 25 of them, right? Now, how many are there? How many? There's like 8. I don't want to blow the whole segment, so I'll just answer it for you. There's like 8.
Okay.
And so if you don't have one, and by the way, I think Saros is one of those 8. Like, he's in my list. So there's 32 teams in the league. Let's just say we're going with I'm right, and there's only 8 A-level guys. What are you supposed to do if you're one of the other 24 teams? Just like give up or say we don't have an A goalie? No, like that becomes your attitude. How do we win without that? You look at Vegas, who won the Stanley Cup last year. They've got a young guy who's really taking off. He could be an A goalie, Aiden Hill, but he's really taking off. But what did they do? They built an incredible team in front of them. Like, you take a look at the size of all their defensemen last year, getting from the other end to Aiden Hill was like going through a corn maze. It was really hard. And that's what Colorado did too. And that's what Tampa, who does have one of those A goalies, did too. They built a defense of guys between like 6'1" and 6'5", or whatever it was, who could all skate. Like that Tampa Colorado Stanley Cup final, which was 2 years ago, one of the guys who was in it told me in that series, if you go back, the smallest defenseman who played listed on either team was Cale Makar, who I think was listed at 6'1", like 187 or something like that. And that was the smallest guy there, and everybody could move. So you couldn't go anywhere in the defensive zone without a body being in front of you or an arm or a leg or a stick. So you build that in front of your net. Now, I'll tell you this, like I remember, like there's one team that I know that they have one of the top goalies and teams call them, and he says, well, you got to be serious. And the other teams say, yeah, we're not really sure that, it makes sense to pay big for a goalie. And he just rolls his eyes and he said, well, if you really believe that, you wouldn't be calling me. So I think that some of it is, I do believe there are teams who legitimately believe that. Like if that maybe you shouldn't pay for a goalie, like you shouldn't pay big for a closer in baseball. But I think there's a lot of other teams who are like, well, if we don't have one of those guys, we have to think like that so we can help us win. And so, like, if someone's calling Barry Trotz and saying, yeah, I'm not sure that we need an A-level goalie to win, Barry Trotz's answer, I bet, is, yeah, sure you don't. You'd love to have what we got, and you're just trying to sneak them out for me. That's how I would react.
But in that same breath, Elliot, looking at the last, 5 or so years of Stanley Cup winners, it hasn't always been, more often than not, has not been the elite goaltender who's ultimately hoisting the cup at the end of the season.
Well, the one guy I would obviously argue with, Carolyn, is Vasilevsky.
Yeah,
and
yes.
He won 2 of them, and he got to within 2 wins of a third one when they lost with Colorado. But, like I said, Adin Hill, although he's rising, he was in Vegas last year. He was the number 1 guy. He's rising. I think he's really. I'm not sure he's going to be like an A-plus goalie, but he's becoming an above-average, very good goalie. But you're right, and Vegas built a big, strong, mobile defense in front of them. Colorado won the Stanley Cup with Darcy Kemper, who I think is like a B goalie. Saros I would put ahead of him, but they built a great defense and great team in front of them. But you know what? I think that's part of the thing now. But you guys see Winnipeg a lot. How much better off do you think Winnipeg is that they convinced Connor Hellebuck to stay? They're very happy. They can, and with you guys, look, Lankinen has given you some good starts this year, and Askarov shows a lot of promise. But let me ask you guys something. You guys are all Predators fans. If you knew UC Saros was gone and your combination was Askarov and Lankinen, you would be hopeful, but you would be very, very nervous.
Totally.
Yeah, you got a year to get it right if that's the case. You know how I feel about UC Saros. Yeah, so, I'm gonna give you about 8 games to make.
Derek does not have very much
He is going to stay strong.
For that
he
talk.
Is staying strong. Even though Askarov keeps reeling off win after win after win in Milwaukee, for sure.
But it's I got to have the proven commodity, and UC seems.
No, Derek. I'm the same way. The thing is, we talked about this before, and I think this is what the Predators. I think the Predators are a really smart organization. And I think what they're weighing is, okay, we know Saros is our backbone. We know how good he is. But this next contract is probably going to be a big one. It's going to take him later into his 30s. Now, goalies, I think, and athletes in general have a longer shelf life. They're much better at taking care of their bodies. So I don't worry about age as much. But, I think you have to think about it. So I think... Like I said, this is not only about Saros as a player, this is also about Saros' next contract. Now, the one thing I do think is I think you guys are looking for offense. I think you guys are out there trying to find a really good youngish offensive player. And that's why Byfield's name came up with Saros, and I wouldn't expect that to happen. But I'll tell you one guy I kind of thought about. I was thinking about writing it today, but I didn't. And this is purely in my head, and that is Natchez from Carolina. That's a guy, he's doing another contract at the end of the year. I don't know what his future is going to be there. But to me, that's the kind of player that I think you guys would – that's the kind of player that would appeal to you guys. Because that's one thing I think you guys are doing. I think you're trying to find a good offensive player out there, and those guys are hard to find.
We're talking with Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts podcast. I think this week Elliot, did a article, so to speak, on his 32 Thoughts. So check that out, please. It's a good read. Now, you were just talking about the scoring aspect. Especially for the Nashville Predators here. There was a stat that was that Willy we talked about earlier, the hit stat, where the Predators are number 1 in regards to hitting their opponent. Now, how does that, because you just brought up the scoring, but how does that translate into scoring, or does it?
Well, I'll tell you this. There are some people who think that leading in hits is not good because it means you don't have the puck a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of truth to that. I do think that can be a factor. That is, sometimes if you have too many hits, it's one of those games where you're always chasing the puck. But I think over a long series, or over a long year. To me, the hitting, honestly, Derek, there are teams who keep this stat privately, and I wish this was more in the public domain. To me, the most important thing is when you have a hit or you have a puck battle, who gets the puck? If you have the Predators are playing, say, the Stars, and Heiskanen's back for the puck, and in comes, say, Parsonen on a forecheck, and Parsonen hits him. To me, the biggest question is who comes out with the puck? Does Heiskanen come out with the puck, or does Parsonen come out with the puck? And so when I look at hit stats, I don't always look at who's doing the hitting. I look at who's got the puck right after that, or where does the puck go right after that. So when the Predators are hitting people, are these just hits that don't do anything, or are they hits that force a turnover? Are they hits that force a battle? Are they hits that create things to you? Again, are you hitting so much because you never have the puck? That's a concern too. But Derek, to me, well, first of all, it shows to me you're a physical team, and that's never bad. But what it says, I'd like to know more. How much do you have the puck? And are those hits turning into something that is a positive for the Predators?
Elliot Friedman with us. Elliot, you just kind of echoed what I've gotten back from Andrew Brunette when I've asked about that, because he sort of inherited this group, and he said that was probably a bigger ingredient in John Hines' way of doing things. He's not as big on that, but the Predators aren't a team that's being outshot every night. So I do think in the context, he is looking for what you were saying. Is this a hit that has a purpose? Am I getting the puck back when I'm doing that? And it's interesting we bring that up because the NHL just did an audit. This is one of your things in your 32 thoughts. Jeremy Lauzon woke up today or yesterday, I guess, and had 29 more hits because and he was already leading the league in hits.
Ah, that's interesting. Well, because you know what, that's interesting. The other thing too is, and I don't think that this is a small thing. And Derek, from the football world, you can appreciate this too. Sometimes I think you need to hit to intimidate. So, that line with the Islanders, Martin, Clutterbuck, and Cizikas, when the Islanders were good, that line, everybody used to joke that if you breathed on someone on Long Island, that was a hit. They always used to claim that the Islanders inflated hits like crazy. But that line was a big part of their identity because when they went out there, people were like, oh, my God, I'm going to get knocked around this shift. So I do think intimidation is a factor. But I didn't realize that with Lauzon. That's pretty funny, actually. Well, and I'll tell you this, for a player like Lauzon, too, that matters. So I did write about that. The NHL announced yesterday that they had done a statistical audit, and it was, and basically what it was about was they changed the amount of hits. And I was under the impression that some agents were complaining, and I heard that they were. But I think the NHL might, after I wrote it, someone told me the NHL might have looked at it too, because they were down about 9 hits a game from the last few years. The hits totals were really off. So they looked at it and they changed it. But a player like Jeremy Lauzon is exactly who I was thinking of. Maybe not him specifically, but what he does. Because if you're an agent and you're doing contract comparables, whether in a negotiation or salary arbitration or something like that, Lauzon is the kind of guy who, the more he hits someone, the more valuable he's going to be, right? Because that's exactly his role. So I am not surprised to hear that, because I think players like him, those agents would be saying something's off here because the numbers don't appear to be right. That's fascinating that Lauzon got the big benefit, because that's exactly the kind of player I was thinking about.
He's got a pretty sizable lead right now in the overall category. It's pretty interesting. He's taken a big step forward. Elliot, what did you take away from the Edmonton-Vegas game? One of the things that I thought about, number one, you guys in your podcast set this up. To have that game in Vegas the week of the Super Bowl was really cool, right? I'm sure there was probably some people that wouldn't otherwise have gone to a game that are now saying, hey, man, I'm going to watch a game in Vegas. And, hey, here's a team trying to set a record. Pretty cool thing to have going on. But Vegas wins, and I'm thinking, imagine this is you're Edmonton. You're bound and determined to win a cup with two of the greatest players of their era. McDavid might be the greatest player ever when it's all said and done. But you got to get past Vegas in the first round.
Yep.
That might be what it is.
Yep. That might be. That's tough. Well, to be honest, I thought Edmonton was the better team that night. I thought that they were better than Vegas, but sometimes that happens. Like, you guys watch hockey as much as anything else. Sometimes you get what we called goalied, and I thought they got goalied. I thought Aiden Hill, who we just talked about a few minutes ago, was fantastic. He was the difference maker, and he was the reason that Vegas won that game. Edmonton was good enough to win that game. But the one thing is, Vegas without Eichel, their number one center, like, they really competed. Like, you could tell, like, as you saw McDavid at the end of the game, man, he was pissed off. He was really pissed off they lost that game. Edmonton really wanted to tie that record, and Vegas took it personally. They were like, we want to stop this. So it was a great game. It was great hockey. Aside from the result, if I was the Oilers, there wouldn't be too much I would be upset with from that game. But, the thing that someone told me was that there was a lot of non-hockey media there. Like, in terms of credentials that got asked for, it was very, very high for a regular NHL game. And I'm with you, Willie. I think that's a great showcase.
You track this a lot. The Predators played Vancouver 3 times fairly early, got beat all 3, and it was during the rise, and people were like, well, Vancouver, they'll come back to earth. They're not great. But here they are. They continue to pile up the points. And everybody, even the statistical nuts, the analytics are saying they're going to come back down to earth. But they just keep going on the roll. How much have they convinced you that they are for real? Because they might be the reason that Edmonton and Vegas have to play in the first round.
Well, they've convinced me for sure, but I think the other key thing is they've convinced themselves. You don't make these kinds of moves that they're making without really believing that you can win. And, I think they're good enough now. I do. I really like the Elias Lindholm from Calgary, the acquisition. Lindholm's a talented guy. I think he was getting crushed by the weight of the situation on him. And still, he doesn't have a contract, but now he's in more of a winning situation. I think that'll really help him. I don't necessarily think they're done. I think they've got a lot. I think they would like to add a bit more depth. I don't know if they're going to add an A-level guy anymore, but I think they'd like to add some depth. I think they're really good, but the one thing I do think is that Pacific Division is going to be a nightmare. And to be honest, the top of your division is a nightmare too, between those 3 teams, Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg.
The first round series, my goodness, the 2 versus 3.
You don't want that. But in the Pacific, as you said, if it's Edmonton, Vegas, those are 2 teams that could win the Stanley Cup. So, but I think that's the thing. Like, this league now, you got to get into the playoffs. It's not easy. Half the league misses. But when you get in, you got a shot. I really do believe that. And this year, I think, is going to prove that again.
Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts, podcast and of Sportsnet. Elliot, always appreciate your time and your insight, and we'll chat with you next week.
All right, guys. Speak next week.
Expecting a full Super Bowl breakdown as well next week, Elliot.
You got it.
Make sure to do your homework. Thank you. I appreciate that. Elliot Friedman, he is the very best. Appreciate him for stopping by. All right, coming up next, Will Levis is in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. I saw that he won a ping pong tournament against Trevor Lawrence yesterday. Big AFC South showdown yesterday. But Jared Stillman caught up with Will Levis yesterday. So that entire interview in its entirety will be played right at 2 p.m. on Stillman & Company right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. But Jared was nice enough to share at least a tidbit of his sit down with Will Levis. So we will get into that coming up next. We'll react to what Will Levis had to say. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase were brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. Also, tune into the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow morning between 9 and 11 a.m. for details on how you could win a pair of tickets to see Def Leppard and Journey with Steve Miller Band at Nissan Stadium.
This time of year, we reflect on the past and make plans for the year ahead. If you made a resolution to lose weight this year and you diet and exercise but still struggle to lose the pounds, it could be that your hormones are deficient, okay? This is Derek Mason, two-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, and you need to call my friends at Cool Springs MD if indeed this is the case, because they're experienced doctors. They specialize in identifying which of your hormones need to be balanced and provide a tailored solution designed just for you, no one else. Hormone deficiencies can also cause more problems than just weight loss, okay? You may experience mood swings, fatigue, and a decreased sex drive. Hormone replacement or HRT can help you. Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and his team understands it's a frustrating cycle and wants to help you be the best you this year. So there's no better time to achieve a healthy lifestyle, people. What are you waiting for? Give Cool Springs MD a call today for an appointment. Here's the number. 615-486-3458. That's 615-486-3458. Or visit their website at coolspringsmd.com. Don't let imbalanced hormones hinder your resolution. Give Cool Springs MD a call today to take control of your health with HRT at Cool Springs MD.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are broadcasting live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. So Titans quarterback Will Levis is in Las Vegas at Radio Row for the Super Bowl. He caught up with Jared yesterday. So Jared will play the entirety of their sit-down at the top of their shows, at the top of the hour, 2 p.m. You'll hear the full Jared and Will Levis interview. But there was one tidbit from the interview that Jared said, I want to get D-Mace's thoughts on this. I want to get his reaction to this. So you'll hear the full interview at 2 o'clock. Here's a snippet of what Will Levis had to say when he sat down with Jared yesterday.
What's the plan in terms of making sure that instead of training for a draft or anything like that, that you are really focused on getting better for the start of next season?
Yeah, I'm definitely like that. You know, I'm a workaholic. You know, I'm gonna work myself into the ground, but right now, you know, I'm not, and I'm you know, enjoying myself for the first time in a really long time, which has been incredible, and you know, letting my body get back, and you know, and here in a week's time or so, we'll hit the ground running again with training, but. It's been a blessing to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor a little bit, you know, these past few weeks. But, you know, as we figure out what the roster looks like, who there's going to be, I'm going to do whatever I can to get with as many guys as I need to, wherever they may be. I'll be, for the most part, in Nashville, so, you know, getting to learn from the new staff and all that. But, yeah, I mean, do whatever I can as a leader to, you know, get everyone else ready.
All right, again, that was Will Levis at the Super Bowl with Jared, Radio Row, rather, with Jared. You'll hear the full interview right at 2 p.m. Now, you know, hearing that from Will Levis, you know, obviously going into year two, it's different. And we've heard this from several different players at different position groups, that year two is so different because you have the offseason to train for the season. That when you're going into your rookie season, when you're going into the draft, you're training for the combine, you're getting coached up on interviews. There's so many other things going on that now you can slow down, focus on the training, focus on building rapport with your receivers and with your offensive line. D-Base, just from your experience, what did those off seasons look like for you as a receiver continuing to build rapport with the quarterback?
It was a little bit different because you got to understand the collective bargaining was a lot different. So there was, you know, we had to be there more or less a lot. So we got a lot of time with Steve or with Neil or with Billy Volick. So we didn't have to, you know, travel to a specific place for all us to get together because we were, for the most part, like, if you made it to the playoffs, say you got deep in the playoff, which a lot of times we did my years here in Nashville, so you would figure you would take, at least me, take 2 weeks off, let your body heal, and then you get back into it from a physical standpoint. But that's a receiver talking. The quarterback, it's different. And he will learn this. There's nothing necessarily wrong with his answer. But as we all know, perception is reality.
Yeah.
What did Rand Carthon say? He said, I like people that love playing football, that love. He said, Tajay Spears was down at the Senior Bowl.
That caught my attention,
he was down at the Senior Bowl. Why? He said, because he wanted to see some guys that he played with, you know, go through practice. He said, that's a guy that on his off time, he's there. He loves football. That's what I want, a guy that loves football. I'm not saying Will Levis doesn't love football. That's not what I'm insinuating here. But perception is reality. Optics are big. You are the starting quarterback for a National Football League team. You are one of 32 starting quarterbacks. Mentally, you're always in the game. You're always studying. That's what makes those guys so great. The Bradys, the Brees, the Mannings. If they are taking a day off, they ain't telling you. They're not letting you know if I take a week or two. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said. There's nothing necessarily wrong with his answer. But when you are the quarterback of a $1 billion franchise, there's no days off for you. There's not. There's no perceived days off for you. Even though you will have days off, you will take a week off here and there. But there's none. From a perception reality, fans out there looking, they don't want their quarterback to have a day off. They want their quarterback to continue to study the game. Don't wait until the staff is put together or who we're going to draft. That means nothing because the offense is there. I'm sure Brian Callahan already said he had a conversation with you. So essentially, you know where this offense is going. Now, if y'all don't have a playbook, I get that part. But I'm sure Brian has given you a little bit of what he's thinking as far as play calling. Matter of fact, just go back and watch some tape of Cincinnati. Just watch their offense because their offense is pretty much going to be your offense in a sense. So go back and watch that. Again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with Will's answer. I don't want to get a perception that was a bad answer. But optics is, as a quarterback of a National Football League team, you're the starters. There's no perceived days off. I don't want to hear you talking about, I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks off, or I'm going to do this and I'm going to wait for the guy. No. There's film room. You need to be in that film room. Yeah, you can go to the Super Bowl. You can do all the little promotional things. But the perception is you need to be in that playbook.
And do you feel like the perception that he gave off there was that he's not?
There could be a perceived notion that, do you love football like Rand said? I'm not saying he doesn't or he does. I'm just do you love football? Do you sleep football? Do you eat football? Because I tell you one guy that loved football, Tom Brady. I'm not saying you're Tom Brady, but you look at all the great quarterbacks. They gave off this perception of, whether it was true or not, that they always had their head in the book. Everything they were doing it was calculated. Everything they did was to make them better as a player. I'm sure Tom went on 2-week vacations, but with Tom, even while on vacation, he was still working mentally or even physically on his craft. This game is a 365-year-a-day job. No longer this is not the old school NFL. It's not. The money is too great. You need to be working your ass off to make sure that you're in a perfect position to lead your team. I'm not saying Will's not doing that. But as a young guy, that second season is the most critical season of your career because it helps because you did, like you said, you did all of that combine stuff the first year. You really didn't get a chance to work out the way you want to. Now you do. So now take your week off. Nobody got to know. Take your week off. But mentally, you're never taking a day off because you are the quarterback of the National Football League team. Everybody else may be able to take a day off. But you as a quarterback, it comes with the territory. So again, it wasn't a bad answer. I'm not saying that Will's not doing the things that he needs to do because I'm sure he probably more than likely is. But when you give a perceived answer like that, everybody's left up to their interpretations. Maybe Rand's looking at it. Maybe Rand looked at it or Brinker looked at it and heard it and said, shouldn't you be in the playbook?
I think, too, it's an example of just when you are the quarterback, everything you say is under the microscope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And everything you do is under the microscope.
The Brian Tannehill Celsius ad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my gosh. Remember that one? Yeah. And the one little comment about Malik Willis, how that was blown up, especially in the offseason, right? But this is the world that Will Levis is going to be living in. And part of knowing how to deal with being under the microscope is also thinking pretty long and hard about what you're going to say to the different questions you get. So,
especially when you don't get a lot of opportunities to speak to the media, at least at this point in the season. And what you put out there is how you are going to be perceived, to your point, D-Mase. What you put out there, you have to be incredibly calculated in what you say. And what you say and what you do might be two different things. But if the message that you're portraying is X, Y, and Z, but what you're doing is something completely different, that's either a positive or a negative thing. Like, you might be saying, look, it was just so nice to be able to just relax and have some time off. I don't have anything against that. Yeah. Like, you should do that. But it might be perceived as, this guy doesn't care.
Right. It's just an example. It doesn't mean that he's doing anything wrong.
Exactly.
Like you said, D-Mase, I do think we all know how important he is to the success of this franchise going forward. He is such a key guy. So this is such a big offseason for him. It's such a big offseason for him.
It's huge. We've got a thought on this. Adam in Portland is on the line. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What's up, Adam?
Hey guys, real quick. So, number one, I don't care what this dude does when he's not on the football field. I think he's a stud. Whatever he has to do. Look at Aaron Rodgers. What a weirdo, right? He's always out doing weird stuff. Kyler Murray loves Nintendo. Like, whatever, man. Like,
how good has Kyler Murray been playing recently?
Exactly.
Arizona cannot wait to replace him.
See, now that's an interesting one to bring up.
That may be the example, right? Like, because people don't need to know that he loves Nintendo. But I don't really care what these dudes do, man, as long as he keeps between the field. And I can tell Will Evans has probably got a ton of personality just by looking at some of the things that people were talking about coming out, all the weird stuff about him. And that's cool and everything, but I just care about what he does on Sunday, man. Hopefully the fans get behind it the same way.
Yeah, thanks for your call, Adam.
But
appreciate
see, here's the thing. What Adam, because he's right in a sense. I get that, but on the other note, I do care about what my quarterback is doing. I do. Why? Because he's leading a team of 52 other men. The billion-dollar franchise is on his back. Mm-hmm. So I do care what you're doing when you're not playing football. So the notion of, I don't care what you're doing outside as long as you play on Sunday, there's a direct correlation between what you do and how you play. And there's a direct correlation in that.
Also, you might not care what Aaron Rodgers was doing because Aaron Rodgers is, 2-3-time MVP and won a Super Bowl? Well, Levis hadn't done any of that.
No. But we didn't really know what Aaron Rodgers was truly doing because, he went to the, how do you pronounce it? I can't pronounce it. Ayahuasca, which I do. I do want to travel down that road. I do. I'm not going to lie about that.
We'll unpack that. We'll get into that.
But even with that, I think Aaron Rodgers was doing it for more clarity in what his career was. How do he make himself better for everyone else in regards to football? I think he didn't just do that just to say, I want to do it to see how it is. No, I want to do it to become a better human, become a better player. So everything, that's what I said. These guys, these great guys, quarterbacks at least, they're calculated at everything that they do. Brady, he's calculated. Manning, calculated. Breeze, all these guys, just watch them throughout the whole year. Half the time you didn't know what Tom Brady was doing unless he allowed you to know. And what was it? Working or not eating strawberries. Exactly. But it all was geared toward what? His play on football. So, Adam, what you do off the field, I do care about. But I knew what Adam was referring to. But when it comes to my quarterback, well, really all of them, but really my quarterback, I do care what you're doing off the field because it does. It a lot of times it is a direct correlation to how you play on the field.
Especially an unproven quarterback.
Exactly.
And especially a quarterback that hadn't won enough games yet.
Yeah.
This isn't a good enough team.
Exactly.
Everything that they're going to do is going to be put under a microscope because you're losing. That's what happens when you're not a good football team.
And again, everybody, because I know how this world is, they will take a snippet of what I said and they will say, Mason said Will Levis isn't doing anything. And no, that's not what I said. Hear me out. Please hear me. I said there's nothing wrong with his answer. I don't have a problem with this answer because I know young guys, you need time off. Yep. But from a quarterback's perspective and position, there can't be perceived any days off. They can't. Why? Because the weight of a franchise is on your back. And when the weight of the franchise is on your back, people don't want to hear about you taking 2-3 weeks off, 4 weeks off, going on vacation. People don't want to hear that because why? You quarterbacking my team.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Look, and that is freaking exhausting.
Yes.
But that's life as a quarterback.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a big old game happening on Sunday. Our friend Ali Melnicki from Zen Sports will join us coming up next with the best bets from the Super Bowl. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. 102.5, 106.3 The Game, and tune in to 94.9 The Fan tonight as Vanderbilt women's basketball takes on LSU at home. Looking forward to that game. Pre-game at 7:45 p.m., tip-off at 8 p.m. with coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app.
The big game is Sunday, and y'all know what game I'm talking about, the Super Bowl. And we know you must be excited not only to watch, but to make some bets as well. And if you like to bet props, head over to Zen Sports, where they offer a ton of special props bet exclusively for the game Sunday. Player props, game props, team props. We'll have Allie on the next segment. We can ask her about the props that they're giving, that they're presenting to you. You name it, they got it. And Zen Sports is running a special promotion. If you make any 5 prop bets on football games of at least $25 or more before kickoff, you will earn a $10 no danger wager the following Monday, okay? What's nice is that you can request a prop bet if you don't see it on Zen Sports, and they will look it up and create it just for you, okay? And for new customers, when you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $1,000 no danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you will be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000 maximum within 24 hours. Max odds are plus 500, people. And there's even more good news. Zen Sports has this VIP program, reward program, which allows top tier customers to earn more bonuses, comps, and perks. The VIP program is by invite only. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, please check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for? Get going, people, and download the Zen Sports app today. That's zensports.com. Zen Sports, betting just got better. And remember this always. Gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Hey, coming up at the top of the hour, Stillman and Company will be broadcasting live from Radio Row in Las Vegas, presented by the Nashville Sheriff. Also at the top of the hour, right at 2 p.m., Jared's conversation with Titans starting quarterback Will Levis. So that's coming up here in just a few minutes. But we've got a big old game on Sunday, and joining us now for the best bets of the Super Bowl, Allie Melnicki, our friend over at Zen Sports. Allie, I'll kick it off. The big question of the week, who you taking, Chiefs or Niners?
I'm going to take the Niners. I really like their defense. I really like what Christian McCaffrey has done with that team, but I think the X factor is Deebo Samuel. If he's 100% healthy, if they could run a ton of different schemes with him, I just think they'll have the upper hand on offense. I know Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the league, but I'm going with Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy and the Niners to win.
I love it. What are maybe some other fun prop bets on the Zen Sportsbook app? Is it maybe, the color of Gatorade or heads or tails with the opening coin flip? What are maybe some fun things that people can get in on?
Sure. We have a lot of great props. We're actually running a prop promotion, so I encourage everyone to check that out. Bet any 5 props. You'll get a no danger wager for Monday. A lot of props I like is that I'm always a big touchdown scorer. I like taking a lot of value, so I look at some of the guys like Noah Gray and Rasheed Rice getting some good value with anytime touchdown scores. Justin Watson's someone I'm looking at. He's been quiet the last few playoff games, but at plus 600 to score a touchdown anytime, I'm going to take him with him. I did good last year. I took Sky Moore plus 900 to score a touchdown, and he did. So I'm going to take one of the underdogs to get one.
We'll talk with Allie Melnicki at Zen Sports. She's giving you some of these prop bets that Zen Sports have going for this week. Now, because even with your prop bets, Allie, there can be bets created for individuals if they don't see a prop bet that they like. Has there been any so far that you can mention?
Not yet, but we're still waiting for them to come in. But we're excited. We're really excited to offer. This is our first Super Bowl while we're in the state of Tennessee, so we're excited to offer any kind of prop bet. You could make a prop bet out of anything. I mean, you can make a prop bet. Will Jason Kelsey be shown next to Taylor Swift? Not that we might not be able to offer that, but we're excited to open up our customer base. And if they have a prop that they like, it'll see on our app. We'll take a look into it and see if we can generate some odds.
Allie Melnicki, Zen Sports. Allie, enjoy the game on Sunday and appreciate you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Allie Melnicki, our friend over at Zen Sports. Now, Will Levis with Jared Stillman right at the top of the hour. What do we want to hear from Levis?
I guess we heard a little bit of it. And I just want to know how this season has been for him, this past season has been for him, and what is he looking forward to, once he gets back to Nashville. That's what I want to hear.
I wonder if he thinks the anticipation of learning the new offense will be how big of a challenge mentally that would be.
Yeah, I think that
how is that a big thing, or because he's been in the league for a year now. He's done it before. He's had to change offenses before. He's got a new one here.
Third offense or fourth offense in as many years.
Because hopefully that will go as seamlessly as possible.
It would be 4, but depending on, because Liam Cohen ran that Sean McVay offense, so he'll see some similarities there, but it's still coming with a different offensive coordinator. And I did hear Charles Robinson on with Robbie and Rexroad this morning. He said it took Kirk Cousins at least about 2 years to really master the Shanahan offense. So that's going to be a challenge for Will Levis. But I'm excited to hear what he had to say with Jared again. That's coming up right at 2 o'clock. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Be love and love on your people. Peace.